A single dinner reservation. For Liam, it was a celebration of his new life, a toast to the future with his perfect fiancée, Chloe. He'd booked the best table at Aria, the city's most exclusive restaurant, a place where memories were made. But he never imagined the ghost of his past would be the one taking their order. For Maya, his pregnant ex-wife, serving them wasn't just a job. It was a front-row seat to the life that was stolen from her. As she approached their candle-lit table, the clinking glasses and soft laughter felt like a countdown to an explosion. The ache started in the small of Maya's back, a dull, persistent throb that radiated down her legs. At 7 months pregnant, her body felt less like her own, and more like a vessel she was merely chauffeuring through the day. A very tired, very sore chauffeur. She pressed a hand against the tight swell of her belly, the baby kicking in response, a tiny, insistent flutter that was both a comfort and a reminder of the monumental task she was facing alone. Her shift at Aria was a special kind of torture. The restaurant was a gilded cage of clinking glasses, hushed conversations, and the scent of truffle oil and old money. It was the kind of place she and Liam used to dream of eating at, back when their dreams were woven together, back when someday felt like a promise, not a curse. Now she navigated its narrow corridors with a tray balanced precariously against her bump, the starched black uniform feeling more like a costume for a life that wasn't hers. "Table 7 needs their check, and the party at 12 is asking for you," Sarah, another waitress, whispered as she breezed by, her expression a mixture of sympathy and frantic energy. "You doing okay, hun? You look pale." Maya forced a smile that felt brittle enough to crack. "Just the usual marathon. This little one is practicing for the soccer team, I think." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Hang in there. Only 2 more hours." 2 more hours felt like a lifetime. Every table she served was a diorama of a life she no longer had. Couples celebrating anniversaries, their hands clasped over the white linen tablecloth. Business partners sealing deals with expensive wine and self-satisfied smiles. She was an invisible cog in the machinery of their happiness, a ghost serving them amuse-bouche, while her own life felt like it was crumbling. The financial pressure was a constant, suffocating weight. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Liam had claimed their shared startup, a small graphic design firm they'd poured their hearts and savings into, had gone bust. He'd shown her spreadsheets, figures that swam before her tear-filled eyes, and told her there was nothing left to divide. He was devastated, he'd said. It was better to cut their losses, go their separate ways, and start fresh. He'd been so convincing, his blue eyes filled with a manufactured sorrow she had been too heartbroken to question. 2 weeks later, he was engaged. Now every dollar she earned at Aria went towards the mounting pile of bills, the rent on her tiny 1-bedroom apartment, the prenatal vitamins, the second-hand crib she'd spent hours assembling with swollen fingers and a trembling chin. She was determined to do this, to build a life for her child, a life of love and stability, even if it was built on the ashes of her old one. The hostess, a statuesque blonde named Tiffany, approached her with a tablet in hand. "Maya, you have a new table. Booth 15 by the window. A VIP reservation." Maya nodded, grabbing 2 leather-bound menus. Booth 15 was the best seat in the house, a secluded alcove with a panoramic view of the glittering city skyline. It was reserved for Aria's most important clientele. She took a deep, steadying breath, smoothed down her apron over her belly, and pasted on her professional smile. Her feet, swollen and protesting in their sensible black flats, carried her across the plush carpeting. The low hum of conversation and the soft strains of a jazz trio filled the air. She saw the booth, the 2 figures silhouetted against the city lights. A man in a sharply tailored suit, his dark hair impeccably styled, a woman with shimmering auburn hair, a deep emerald dress clinging to her slender frame. A diamond bracelet on her wrist caught the candlelight and threw sparks of fire across the table. Maya's steps faltered. The air in her lungs turned to ice. It couldn't be. Her mind rejected the image, tried to twist it into something else, a trick of the light, a cruel coincidence. But as the man turned his head, his profile illuminated by the flickering candle, the world tilted on its axis. Liam. It was Liam. And the woman across from him, the one he was gazing at with an expression of adoration that Maya once thought was reserved only for her, was not just any woman. It was Chloe Davenport, daughter of the real estate tycoon Richard Davenport. Her picture was a regular feature in the society pages, always on the arm of some eligible bachelor. Now she was on Liam's arm. Every sound in the restaurant faded into a dull roar in Maya's ears. The menu in her hand suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. This wasn't just a new girlfriend. This was an upgrade, a trade-in. The failed graphic designer who had nothing left was dining in the most expensive restaurant in the city with an heiress. The spreadsheets, the lies, the feigned devastation, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her first instinct was to run, to turn and flee to the kitchen, hide in the pantry, and let the sobs that were clawing at her throat finally break free. But then the baby kicked again, a sharp, grounding reminder. She was not the same girl who had blindly trusted Liam. She was a mother, and she needed this job. A cold, hard resolve settled over her. She would not fall apart. She would not give them the satisfaction. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked the final few steps to the table. She placed the menus down with a steady hand, her gaze fixed on a point just over their heads. "Good evening," she said, her voice a stranger's, miraculously calm and even. "My name is Maya, and I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" And then Liam looked up. Liam felt the weight of Chloe's hand on his, her fingers cool and delicate. The diamond on her ring finger, a 2-carat stone he'd leveraged his entire future to buy, glinted in the candlelight. Everything in his life was glinting now. The polished chrome of his new car, the glass walls of his corner office, the sparkling champagne they were about to order. He had meticulously constructed this new reality, a gleaming fortress designed to keep the failures of his past at bay. "Isn't this perfect?" Chloe murmured, her voice like honeyed silk. She gestured towards the window, the city sprawling beneath them like a carpet of jewels. "Dad was right. You really can't beat the view from here." Liam smiled, a smooth, practiced motion that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Only the best for you, Chloe." And that was the truth. He was dating, and would soon be marrying, into a different stratosphere. Richard Davenport wasn't just a father-in-law, he was a kingmaker. He had seen potential in Liam, a hungry ambition that mirrored his own. With a few phone calls and a substantial investment, framed as a wedding gift, Davenport had resurrected Liam's failed design firm, rebranding it, injecting it with capital, and handing him the keys to a kingdom he could never have built on his own. All he had to do was keep Chloe happy and prove he was worthy of the Davenport name. The divorce from Maya felt like a lifetime ago, a messy, inconvenient chapter he had slammed shut. In his version of the story, he was the victim of circumstance. A failing business, a marriage crumbling under the weight of financial stress. He had convinced himself that ending it was a mercy for both of them. He told himself that Maya, with her simple dreams of a small house and a family, would be happier without the burden of his ambition. He'd conveniently omitted the part where his ambition had led him straight into Chloe's orbit at a business mixer, weeks before he'd even mentioned the word divorce to Maya. He had seen his chance, a golden ladder out of the life he'd felt trapped in, and he had taken it. The lies he'd spun for Maya were the same lies he now told himself, a soothing mantra to drown out the faint, persistent whisper of guilt. "Let's get some champagne," Chloe said, pulling him from his thoughts, "to celebrate the new contract." "To us," Liam corrected, raising his water glass in a mock toast. He felt a surge of genuine affection for her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and her belief in him was the fuel that powered his ascent. He was winning. He had won. A shadow fell over the table. He looked up, a polite, dismissive smile ready for the server. And then the world stopped. "Good evening. My name is Maya, and I'll be your server tonight." The voice was the same, but it was hollowed out, stripped of the warmth and laughter he remembered. It was the voice of a stranger wearing his ex-wife's face, but it was her, older, her face thinner, etched with a weariness that hadn't been there before. And then his eyes dropped. Below the crisp white apron, her body was round, swollen with a pregnancy that was unmistakable and far along. A roaring sound filled his ears, like the ocean rushing in to swallow him whole. Time seemed to splinter. He saw Maya, not in a server's uniform, but in the faded t-shirt she used to sleep in, curled up next to him on their lumpy couch, her hand resting on her stomach as she talked about names for a baby they'd have someday. He saw her in their tiny office, her brow furrowed in concentration as she sketched out a logo, her belief in their shared dream absolute. He saw her face the day he'd told her it was over, the way the light had just gone out. And now she was standing here, carrying his child. It had to be his child, the timing was right, and asking him if he wanted something to drink. The sheer, gut-wrenching absurdity of it was a physical blow. He was celebrating a life he had built on the wreckage of hers, and she was the one serving him champagne. His mouth was dry, his tongue a useless piece of leather. Words, his greatest asset, the tools he used to build his new world, deserted him completely. He could only stare, his carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of her gaze. "Liam, darling, are you all right?" Chloe's voice cut through the fog, sharp and concerned. She followed his gaze to Maya, her eyes narrowing slightly. She took in the tired face, the worn-out shoes, and the prominent, damning curve of her belly. A flicker of something, curiosity, suspicion, crossed her perfect features. "Do you know her?" Chloe asked, her tone light but with an underlying edge of steel. The question hung in the air between them, a grenade with the pin pulled. Liam's mind raced, searching for an escape route, a lie plausible enough to patch the gaping hole that had just been torn in his reality. He couldn't tell the truth. The truth would unravel everything. It would expose the foundation of their relationship for what it was, a calculated business merger built on a bedrock of deceit. Richard Davenport did not tolerate messy, emotional baggage. Maya didn't flinch. Her eyes, which had been fixed somewhere in the middle distance, now met his. And for a split second, beneath the veneer of professional indifference, he saw it all. The pain, the betrayal, the history they shared. It was a silent, damning accusation. He opened his mouth, a denial forming on his lips, but no sound came out. He was frozen, a statue in a tailored suit, trapped in the wreckage of his own making, with the ghost of his past waiting to take his order. The silence at booth 15 stretched into a taut, vibrating wire. For Maya, each second was an eternity. She could feel the heat of Liam's panicked stare on her skin, the sharp, analytical quality of Chloe's gaze. She kept her own expression placid, a mask of polite inquiry she had perfected over hundreds of shifts. Inside, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Finally, Liam cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "No," he said, the word coming out as a croak. He cleared his throat again, forcing a smoother tone. "No, I just thought she looked familiar for a second. A case of mistaken identity." He gave a small, dismissive laugh that didn't come close to sounding genuine. Chloe's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. She didn't look at Liam, but kept her eyes on Maya, a slow, deliberate appraisal that was far more unnerving than open hostility. "I see. Well," she turned the full force of her dazzling smile on Maya, a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "We'll start with a bottle of the Veuve Clicquot." It wasn't a request, it was a command. "Of course," Maya said, her voice steady. She gave a slight nod and turned away from the table, her movements measured and deliberate. She didn't let herself breathe until she reached the relative anonymity of the server's station. Her hands were trembling. She gripped the edge of the marble counter, focusing on the cold, solid feel of it beneath her fingers. Mistaken identity. The phrase echoed in her head, a cruel, bitter joke. He had erased her so completely from his life that he was now pretending she was a stranger who was carrying his child. A hot surge of anger, pure and clarifying, burned through the shock. How dare he? How dare he sit there draped in success that should have been theirs and dismiss her like a passing thought? She retrieved the champagne, her body moving on autopilot. As she returned to the table, she caught snippets of their conversation. Completely blindsided the competition, Liam was saying, his voice regaining its usual confident cadence. Once your father's firm backed the new proposal, they had no choice but to fold. Daddy always knows a good investment when he sees one, Chloe replied, her voice laced with pride. And he sees one in you, darling. Maya's hands worked deftly, uncorking the bottle with a soft hiss, the sound punctuating Chloe's words. A good investment. That's what Liam was. That's what he had traded their life for. She remembered the nights they had spent huddled over a laptop in their cramped apartment, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared vision. Liam, the charismatic frontman, the one who could sell their ideas with a dazzling smile. And she, the quiet engine, the one who spent hours perfecting the designs, the one who made his pitches beautiful. They had been a team. His success was built on her foundation. She poured the golden liquid into their fluted glasses, her movements graceful and economical. She avoided looking at Liam, but she could feel his tension, a frantic energy radiating from him. He was terrified. Good. So, Chloe said, her voice cutting through Maya's thoughts. She had turned her attention back to her. Aria must be a wonderful place to work, though it must be difficult in your condition. She gestured vaguely towards Maya's stomach, her lips curved in a sympathetic pout that was patently false. The question was a probe, a delicate instrument searching for a weakness. I manage, Maya said, her tone cool and even. The tips are good. She let the implication hang in the air. I need the money. Chloe's eyes glittered. I'm sure. And your husband, is he supportive? The cruelty of the question was breathtaking. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his knuckles white where he gripped his champagne flute. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He wouldn't defend her. He wouldn't even acknowledge her. Maya held Chloe's gaze. She could lie. She could invent a supportive, loving husband and preserve some scrap of her pride. But why should she? Why should she protect them? I'm not married, she said, her voice quiet but firm. The baby's father isn't in the picture. The admission landed on the table with the force of a physical blow. Chloe's mask of polite interest slipped, replaced by a flash of triumphant pity. Liam looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Oh, you poor thing, Chloe murmured, the condescension dripping from every syllable. How brave of you to go it alone. Before Maya could respond, a voice from the kitchen called her name, saved by the bell. Excuse me, she said, her professional demeanor snapping back into place. Your appetizers will be out shortly. As she walked away, her ears straining, she caught a final whispered snippet of their conversation. It was Liam, his voice low and urgent. Don't know why you're pushing her like that. Just drop it. And Chloe's reply cold and clear as ice. I'm not pushing, darling. I'm just curious about the kind of people who serve our food. We have to maintain a certain standard after all, especially with the Davenport name attached to everything you do now. The words hit Maya harder than any of the fake sympathy. The Davenport name. It all came back to that. Liam hadn't just left her. He had been absorbed into a world where she didn't belong. A world where a pregnant single waitress was not a person, but a potential blemish on their pristine reputation. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this dinner was not just a celebration. It was a test, and she was the final, unexpected question on the exam. The rest of the service was a blur. Maya moved through the motions, a numb, efficient automaton. She delivered their pan-seared scallops and filet mignon, refilled their water glasses, and cleared their plates, all while maintaining a bubble of professional detachment. Inside that bubble, a storm raged. Every polite request from Chloe felt like a jab, every averted glance from Liam a fresh betrayal. They finished their meal, paid the exorbitant bill, leaving a painfully condescending 50% tip, and left without another word. The moment their backs were turned, the bubble burst. Maya stumbled towards the kitchen, her legs shaking so violently she could barely stand. She shoved through the swinging doors, the clatter and heat of the kitchen enveloping her, and made a beeline for the narrow, dark hallway that led to the staff lockers. She leaned against the cool metal, her forehead pressed against the door of her own locker, and finally let out the breath she felt like she'd been holding for an hour. It came out as a ragged, strangled sob. The tears came then, hot and silent, tracking paths through the makeup she'd so carefully applied that afternoon. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the crushing weight of the truth. The business hadn't failed. Liam hadn't left her because they were broke. He had left her for this, for Chloe, for the Davenport name and the world of effortless success it represented. He had not only discarded her, he had profited from it, building his glittering new life on a foundation of lies while she was left to serve him champagne on her swollen, aching feet. "Maya?" Sarah's voice was soft behind her. "Hey, I saw them leave. Are you okay?" Maya couldn't speak. She just shook her head, her shoulders heaving with silent sobs. Sarah wrapped her arms around her, her embrace warm and solid. "I know," she whispered, rubbing her back. "I saw his face when he looked at you. What a world-class jerk." Leaning on her friend, Maya let some of the grief pour out. She told Sarah everything, the words tumbling out in a broken whisper, the shared dreams, the startup, the sudden, inexplicable divorce, the lies about being broke, and now this, the final cruel twist of the knife. "He told you the business failed?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with indignation when Maya was finished. "Maya, that's not just being a jerk. That sounds illegal." Maya just shook her head, too exhausted to even contemplate the idea. "It doesn't matter. There's nothing I can do. He has the Davenports behind him. I'm nobody." The word tasted like ash in her mouth. She finished her shift in a haze, the final hour a crawl of meaningless tasks. When she finally clocked out, she felt hollowed out, a fragile shell of a person. She changed out of her uniform, the fabric clinging uncomfortably to her skin, and prepared for the long bus ride home. As she walked through the now emptying dining room, a man sitting alone at a small table near the door caught her eye. He was older, with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed grey beard, dressed in a simple but elegant tweed jacket. He had been there for most of her shift, nursing a single glass of scotch and reading a book. He had offered her a small, sympathetic smile earlier in the evening, after one of Chloe's more pointed questions. As she passed, he looked up and gestured for her to approach. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice a gentle baritone. Maya paused, her waitress smile automatically clicking into place. "Yes, sir. Can I get you anything else?" "No, thank you. I'm quite all right." He folded his hands on the table. "My name is Arthur Harrison. I couldn't help but notice the difficult situation you were in earlier this evening with the party in booth 15. He spoke with a quiet discretion that put her immediately at ease. "I'm a lawyer, and I've had some dealings with Richard Davenport's organization in the past. He's not a man who values honesty in his business partners." Maya stared at him, stunned. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. "I don't mean to intrude, and please, forgive me if I'm overstepping, but you look like someone who has been profoundly wronged." He pushed the card across the table towards her. If you ever find yourself in need of some advice, some pro bono advice, please don't hesitate to call. Sometimes a person who feels like a nobody just needs someone in their corner. He had used her own word. The word she had whispered to Sarah in the dark hallway. Maya looked from his kind, steady gaze to the heavy cardstock in her hand. Arthur Harrison, attorney at law. A tiny, fragile seed of something she hadn't felt in months began to sprout in the barren landscape of her heart. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was a flicker of possibility. The possibility that she didn't have to just endure this. The possibility that she could, perhaps, fight back. She closed her fingers around the card, the sharp corners digging into her palm, a small, grounding pain. "Thank you," she whispered, the words feeling strangely inadequate. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison." He simply nodded, a gentle understanding in his eyes. "Take care of yourself," he said, his gaze dropping for a moment to her belly, "and that little one." As Maya walked out into the cool night air, the city lights seemed a little less mocking, a little less cruel. The business card in her pocket felt like a secret, a weapon. For the first time since Liam had walked out of her life, she felt a sliver of power. The silent, tense atmosphere in Liam's Mercedes was a stark contrast to the cheerful music wafting from the high-end sound system. The city lights smeared past the windows, but Liam saw none of them. He was replaying the dinner in his mind, a horror film on a loop. Maya's face, the swell of her stomach, the deadness in her eyes, Chloe's sharp, calculating questions. "So, are you going to tell me what that was all about?" Chloe's voice was deceptively calm, but Liam had been with her long enough to recognize the dangerous undercurrent. He kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the leather-wrapped steering wheel. "I told you, I don't know her. She just looked vaguely familiar." The lie felt thin and flimsy, even to him. "Don't insult my intelligence, Liam," Chloe snapped, the calm facade vanishing. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost, a pregnant ghost. You froze. I've seen you negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal without breaking a sweat, but you couldn't even order a drink from a waitress. Who is she?" This was the moment he had always dreaded. The collision of his two worlds. He had worked so hard to keep them separate, to bury the truth of his past under a mountain of ambition and success. "She's no one," he insisted, his voice rising. "She's an ex, from a long time ago. It was a messy breakup, and I was just surprised to see her, that's all." "An ex?" Chloe's laugh was short and brittle. "And the baby? Let me guess, just a coincidence." "Of course it's a coincidence. It has to be," he said, a little too quickly. The math worked. He knew it did. That last, desperate, heartbreaking night together before he'd left. It was possible. The thought sent a jolt of panic through him, so potent it was nauseating. If that baby was his, and Chloe found out. "A messy breakup," Chloe repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. "You told me your only serious relationship before me was in college." "This wasn't serious," he lied, the words tasting like poison. Not serious. He had married Maya. They had built a life, a business, a future. He was desecrating that memory, and for what? To protect this new life, this fragile, glittering prize. She looked pretty serious, Chloe countered, and seriously poor. "What happened? Did you ruin her life and leave her pregnant and alone?" Her tone was mocking, but there was a flicker of genuine alarm in her eyes. The Davenports did not do scandal. Their reputation was everything. A jilted, pregnant ex-wife working as a waitress was a PR nightmare waiting to happen. "It wasn't like that," Liam said, his voice pleading now. "The business we had, it failed. It ruined us both financially. The breakup was mutual, I swear." He risked a glance at her. She was staring out the window, her jaw tight, her reflection a mask of displeasure in the dark glass. She didn't believe him. He wasn't sure if it was the pregnancy or the lie itself, but he had planted a seed of doubt. And he knew Chloe well enough to know she would not let it go. They drove the rest of the way to her penthouse in silence. When he pulled into the private garage, she turned to him. "My father is hosting a brunch at the club on Sunday. He wants to finalize the paperwork on the merger. Don't be late." It was a dismissal. She got out of the car without a kiss, without another word, and disappeared into the elevator. Liam sat in the silent car, the engine ticking as it cooled. He felt a wave of cold dread wash over him. He had dodged the bullet for now, but he was wounded. He had seen the look in Chloe's eyes. She was going to dig, and if she dug, she would find things he had carefully buried. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly, and scrolled to a number he hadn't called in months. His former business partner and current head of operations, Mark. Mark picked up on the second ring. "Liam? Everything okay? It's late." "I have a problem," Liam said, his voice low and urgent. "A big one. It's about the dissolution of the old company, the one with Maya." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What about it?" Mark's voice was wary. "She's back," Liam said, the words feeling like a confession. "She's in the city, and there's a complication." "What kind of complication?" Liam squeezed his eyes shut. "She's pregnant, Mark, and I think there's a chance she won't just go away quietly this time." He thought of the look in her eyes as she'd walked away from their table. It wasn't just pain, it was something harder, something that looked dangerously like resolve. "The financials are buried, Liam," Mark said, trying to sound reassuring. "The holding company we funneled the assets through, it's airtight." She signed the papers. She agreed there was nothing left. "Papers can be looked at again," Liam hissed. "Lawyers can be hired. All it takes is one loose thread. You and I both know we didn't just dissolve that company. We stripped it, sold the assets, and used the capital as seed money for the new firm. We told her it was worthless." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with shared guilt. "What do you want me to do?" Mark finally asked. "I want you to go back through everything," Liam commanded, his voice shaking with a fear he hadn't felt since before the money, before Chloe, before the lies had become his reality. "Every transaction, every email. Make sure it's buried so deep God himself couldn't find it. Because if Chloe or her father finds out I built this entire enterprise on a lie and a stolen business, I'm finished." The next few days were a fog of exhaustion and anxiety for Maya. She went to work, smiled at customers, and carried heavy trays until her back screamed in protest. But her mind was elsewhere. It was replaying the dinner, dissecting every word, every look. It was fixated on Chloe's final cutting remark. "The Davenport name attached to everything you do now." Liam hadn't started a new business. The Davenports had attached their name to his business, their business. The one he'd claimed was a worthless pile of debt. The lie was so audacious, so colossal, that she had been too grief-stricken to see it. He hadn't just cheated on her, he had orchestrated a complete financial deception. He hadn't just broken her heart, he had stolen her future. The anger that had been simmering for months finally boiled over, scalding away the last of her self-pity. She thought about their business, Creative Spark Designs. She remembered a specific project they had landed just before the end. It was their biggest client yet, a boutique hotel chain called the Mariner Group. They were contracted to do a complete branding overhaul, logos, web design, marketing materials. It was a massive undertaking, the kind of project that could have made their company. Liam had been the one to handle the final contract negotiations. Then, a week later, he had come to her with his spreadsheets and his sad eyes, telling her the Mariner Group had pulled out at the last minute, bankrupting them. It had never made sense. The Mariner Group was expanding, not failing. But she had trusted him. On her day off, Maya sat at the small, wobbly desk in her apartment, Arthur Harrison's business card lying next to her laptop. Her fingers trembled as she typed the Mariner Group into the search bar. The hotel's website loaded, sleek and modern. And there it was, at the bottom of the page, in small, elegant print. Branding and Web Design by Croft Vance Creative. Croft Vance Creative. Liam's last name was Croft, and his new business partner, Mark, his last name was Vance. They hadn't even bothered to change the name that much. It was a slap in the face. She clicked on the design firm's website. It was a slick corporate portfolio filled with high-profile clients, and front and center in their featured projects was the complete branding package for the Mariner Group, dated 6 months ago, the exact time Liam had claimed they were bankrupt. The proof was right there, hiding in plain sight. Her breath hitched. Sarah's words echoed in her ears. "That sounds illegal." Her hand closed around her phone. She stared at the business card. Making that call felt like stepping off a cliff. It would mean declaring war on Liam, and by extension, the Davenport Empire. It was terrifying. But what was the alternative? To let him get away with it, to raise her child on Waitress tips while the man who should be providing for them lived a life of luxury built on her stolen work and trust. The baby kicked, a strong, insistent thump against her ribs. It was all the courage she needed. She dialed the number. "Harrison Law, how can I help you?" a polite receptionist answered. "My name is Maya," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Mr. Arthur Harrison gave me his card. He told me to call if I needed advice." An hour later, she was sitting in Mr. Harrison's quiet, book-lined office. It was a world away from the chaos of Aria and the cramped confines of her apartment. It was calm. It was safe. With a gentle, reassuring demeanor, he listened as she laid out the entire story, from the founding of Creative Spark Designs to the shocking dinner at Aria to the discovery she had made that morning. She pulled up the websites on her phone, her hands trembling as she showed him the undeniable proof. Mr. Harrison listened intently, his fingers steepled, his expression thoughtful. He didn't interrupt. Just nodded occasionally, his kind eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, there was a long silence. "Maya," he finally said, his voice soft but firm, "this is more than just a messy divorce. Based on what you've shown me and what I know of Liam Croft's new benefactor, this has all the hallmarks of deliberate asset stripping and fraudulent misrepresentation." The legal terms were intimidating, but the meaning was clear. Liam hadn't just lied, he had committed a crime. "What he did," Mr. Harrison continued, leaning forward, "was convince you to dissolve a partnership and sign away your rights to a shared asset, the business, by falsely claiming it had no value. Then he and his partner effectively transferred that asset, including its most valuable contract, into a new entity, cutting you out completely. He stole your half of the company." Hearing it laid out so plainly, so clinically, validated everything. She wasn't crazy, she hadn't been a fool, she had been a victim of a calculated, cruel deception. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We can fight," he said, a hint of steel in his tone. "It won't be easy. The Davenports will bring their army of lawyers. They will try to bury us in paperwork and motions. They will try to intimidate you, to paint you as a bitter ex-wife looking for a handout." He held her gaze. "But the truth is on your side. And the documentation, it seems, is on the internet for everyone to see. That was his first and biggest mistake." He stood up and walked to his window, looking down at the bustling street below. "It's your decision, Maya. We can send a letter, demand a settlement, or we can file a lawsuit and take this public. The second option is riskier, but a public lawsuit is the one thing Richard Davenport fears more than anything. It's bad for the brand." Maya thought of Chloe's smug, pitying face. She thought of Liam's cowardice. She thought of her baby and the life she deserved. A quiet settlement wouldn't erase the humiliation, the sheer injustice of it all. It had to be a reckoning. She stood up, her spine straight, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "I want to file the lawsuit." The letter from Arthur Harrison's office, a formal notice of impending legal action, landed on Liam's desk with the impact of a bomb. He read it once, then twice, the legal jargon swimming before his eyes, but the message was brutally clear. Maya knew. She knew about the Mariner Group. She knew about Croft Vance. She was suing for fraud, demanding her half of the company's valuation and punitive damages. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. He had been so consumed with hiding the truth from Chloe that he had underestimated Maya. He had mistaken her quiet grief for weakness, her silence for acceptance. He had treated her like a footnote in his life story, and she was about to rewrite the entire book. His first call was to Mark, who cursed a blue streak before confirming their worst fears. The digital paper trail was undeniable. His second call was to the Davenport's chief legal counsel, a shark in a $1,000 suit, who listened grimly and told him not to speak another word to anyone. His third and most dreaded call was to Chloe. He tried to downplay it, to frame it as a nuisance lawsuit from a disgruntled ex, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt he had planted had sprouted into a thorny, unmanageable weed. He had to see Maya. He had to fix this, not with lawyers, but with the personal touch he'd always relied on. He could explain, he told himself. He could make her understand the pressure he was under, the opportunity he couldn't pass up. He could appeal to the history they shared, the connection that he now realized with a sickening lurch he had never truly severed. He found out from Sarah, the waitress at Aria, a call that cost him $500 and a piece of his soul, that Maya had her day off. He knew where she would be. There was only one place that held any meaning for what they once had. The old office for Creative Spark Designs was in a rundown brick building on the industrial side of town. He hadn't been back since the day he'd packed his things, leaving Maya's half of the room untouched. As he pushed open the unlocked door, the scent of dust and stale coffee hit him. It looked exactly the same, a perfect time capsule of their shared dream. Her drafting table still stood by the window, a few stray pencils lying on its surface. The corkboard on the wall was still covered in their initial sketches, brainstorming notes, and a faded photograph of the two of them, young and smiling, taken the day they'd signed the lease. And she was there, standing in the middle of the room, her silhouette framed by the grimy window. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the photo on the wall. "I knew you'd come here," she said, without turning around. Her voice was calm, devoid of the emotion he'd expected. It was scarier that way. "Maya, we need to talk," he began, stepping into the room. "This lawsuit, it's a mistake. We can settle this quietly. You don't want to get into a war with the Davenports." She finally turned to face him. The weariness was gone from her eyes, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "This isn't about the Davenports, Liam. This is about you and me. This is about this room. This is about what you did." "I was drowning," he said, the words tumbling out, a desperate, pathetic confession. "The business was slow. We were in debt. I met Chloe and her father. He saw something in me. It was a lifeline, Maya. A chance to be someone, to have the life we always talked about. The life we talked about." Her laugh was a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. "The life we talked about involved us building it together. It involved this office, this struggle. It didn't involve you lying to me, stealing from me, and leaving me to raise our child alone while you played prince consort to some heiress." "I didn't know you were pregnant," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "I swear, Maya, if I had known." "What?" she shot back. "What would you have done, Liam? Written me a bigger check to make me go away? You still would have left. You still would have lied. The money, the status, that's what you chose. You didn't just leave me, you erased me." She walked to her old desk and picked up a piece of paper. It was a copy of the final dissolution agreement she had signed. "I trusted you," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "You were my husband, my partner. I would have followed you into any failure, any hardship. The one thing I couldn't handle was being betrayed. And you didn't just betray me. You planned it. You executed it like a business deal." The raw truth of her words stripped away his last defense. He saw himself for what he was, a coward and a thief, a man who had sold his soul for a corner office and a view of the city. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing the air from his lungs. "I'm sorry," he said, the words utterly inadequate. "Maya, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this." The door to the office creaked open. Both of them turned. It was Chloe, her face a pale, tight mask of fury. She held her phone in her hand, the screen glowing. "I followed you," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. She looked from Liam's shattered expression to Maya's resolute stance. "I've been having a private investigator look into you for the past week, Liam. Into your failed business, into your messy breakup." She took a step into the room, her cold eyes sweeping over the dusty office, the symbol of a life he'd sworn never existed. "It turns out," she continued, her gaze landing on Liam with surgical precision, "my father doesn't just invest in ambitious young men, he invests in their stories. And your story, it was all a lie. You didn't just leave her, you robbed her." She looked at Maya then, a flicker of something, not sympathy, but a grudging woman-to-woman respect in her eyes. "He told me the baby wasn't his." The final lie hung in the air, ugly and exposed. Liam looked between the two women, the woman whose past he had destroyed and the woman whose future he had just lost. The walls of his carefully constructed kingdom were crashing down around him, and he was standing alone in the rubble. 8 months later, the autumn sunlight streamed through the large picture window of a bright, airy design studio. The walls were painted a clean, optimistic white, adorned with vibrant logo concepts and branding boards. In the corner, a sleek, modern crib was nestled next to a large drafting table. This was Maya's space, her company, her new beginning. The lawsuit had settled out of court. Faced with irrefutable evidence and the threat of a public scandal that would tarnish the Davenport name, Richard Davenport had cut his losses. He had cut Liam loose with brutal efficiency. The settlement was more than fair. It was a figure that acknowledged not only Maya's stolen half of the business, but also the projected earnings she had been cheated out of. It was justice, delivered in the cold, hard language of a wire transfer. But the money was secondary. What she had truly won back was herself. A soft gurgle came from the crib. Maya smiled, walking over to look down at her son. Daniel. He was 3 months old, a perfect tiny being with a tuft of dark hair and a pair of startlingly familiar blue eyes. For a long time, she had worried that looking at him would be a constant, painful reminder of Liam. But as she picked him up, his warm, small body moulding against hers, all she felt was a fierce, overwhelming love. He wasn't a reminder of a betrayal. He was hers, a testament to her own strength. The bell on the studio door chimed. Arthur Harrison walked in, a broad smile on his face. He had become more than her lawyer. He was a mentor and a friend. "He's looking bigger every time I see him," Arthur said, chucking Daniel gently under the chin. "He's a good boy," Maya said, her heart swelling. "And business is good. The Mariner Group dropped Croft Vance the second the story broke. They signed with me last week. It was the ultimate poetic justice." "I never doubted it," Arthur said. "I came to tell you the final papers are signed. The dissolution of your marriage to Liam Croft is official, and there was one other thing." He handed her a plain white envelope. "This came to my office for you. It's from him." Maya's breath caught. She hadn't seen or heard from Liam since that day in the old office. Chloe had left him immediately, and the Davenports had systematically dismantled his career, blacklisting him from every major firm in the city. He had lost everything. She put Daniel back in his crib and hesitantly opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small velvet pouch. The letter wasn't an excuse or a plea. It was a confession. He wrote of his greed, his fear of failure, and the profound shame he now felt for what he had done. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only stated that he was trying to become a man who might one day be worthy of it. He was working a menial job, he wrote, and had started therapy. He was taking the first painful steps on a long road to redemption. Her hands trembling, Maya opened the pouch. Inside was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, worn smooth with age. It was the first gift he had ever given her, a trinket he'd bought from a street vendor on their first date, back when they were just two kids with a shared dream. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of release, a final letting go of the ghost that had haunted her for so long. She didn't know if Liam would ever fully redeem himself, but for the first time, she believed he was trying, and she realized, with a sense of profound peace, that his journey was no longer tied to hers. She looked around her sunlit studio at the evidence of the life she had built, not from ashes, but from her own talent and resilience. She looked at her beautiful son, sleeping peacefully, a symbol not of what was lost, but of everything she had gained. Her future was a clean white canvas, and she was the only artist she needed. She was not a victim. She was not a ghost at someone else's table. She was Maya, and she was finally, completely free. Maya's journey from a heartbroken waitress to a successful business owner shows us the incredible power of resilience. She faced the ultimate betrayal, but refused to let it define her, turning her pain into the fuel she needed to reclaim her life and build a new future for herself and her son. Liam's story is a powerful reminder that the choices we make have consequences, but also that redemption is possible, even if the path is long and difficult. What did you think of Maya's story? Do you believe Liam deserved a second chance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of betrayal and empowerment, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more emotional real-life stories.